Hello class. The purpose of this video is to help you to gain a better understanding of the diamond model. So let's get started. So the diamond model was developed by a professor named Andrew van de Ven from the Department of Strategic Management and Entrepreneurship here at the Carlson School of Management. And he set up this model for dealing with complex opportunities and problems. The idea is that when you're confronted with making a non-programmed decision, this is typically a complex situation. And oftentimes when we begin this process, we experience some situation in which we identify an opportunity or a problem that we think exists in that particular situation, but oftentimes we don't do our due diligence. And when others present us with problems and opportunities, sometimes they don't do their due diligence either to make sure that the situation that they've evaluated actually presents the problem or the opportunity that they are communicating to us. So the idea of this model is to begin with evaluating a situation, and from that situation determining what that problem or question is or opportunity, to do some research to evaluate how others have tried to solve similar problems, and from that to ultimately get to home plate by formulating a very good solution, an optimal solution. So the key thing is that when we're presented with a problem or an opportunity, an important first step is to really ask, what is the situation or the case reality upon which that opportunity was derived? From that situation are revealed symptoms. We could also call these symptoms variables or indicators. An indicator is an indicator of an opportunity. A symptom is a variable that represents something that needs to be evaluated that could portend to a problem. And from that, those variables could be people, processes, actions that are going on within the situation. We need to ask questions. Well, Jack Welch, the former CEO of General Electric, came up with this concept called the 5 whys. And the idea of the 5 whys is asking layers of questions in order to delve down to what the core root or conclusion is that we should be reaching in association with the situation that we're evaluating. And oftentimes people, in essence, he thought, go too shallow in trying to address and understand a situation. So the idea of 5 whys was that maybe you would need to ask up to 5 layers of questioning associated with any particular issue in a situation in order to delve down and really identify clearly what that conclusion is that should be reached. Once you've reached that conclusion, and that conclusion meaning the problem or the opportunity that needs to be addressed, the next step is to identify the causative factors. When we're looking at causative factors, we're trying to identify whether or not that causative factor is or what those causative factors are for a problem, or what those causative factors are for that opportunity. In the case of an opportunity, the causative factors are causative factors we would want to put in place that would enable that opportunity. In terms of the problem, the causative factors are already there that exist that enable the problem condition to exist, and so what we would want to do in the case of the problem is disable those causative factors through our solution. But interestingly enough, as individuals, when we're dealing with complex situations, we are confronted with the issue of bounded rationality. And what we meant by with bounded rationality is that, in essence, we don't necessarily incorporate all of the information of what's really happening in a situation in order to better understand what all of the dynamics are in that situation. But when we look at comparative models of what others have done, oftentimes those models expand our perspective with regard to what it is that we need to address. So we examine the conceptual model, and the conceptual model is not necessarily a model that dealt with the exact same situation as the problem or opportunity that we're addressing, but it could be a similar type of situation. And from that, we learn the logic of that model. And we also learn about what's called the qualifiers of that model. There could be a committee, people, resources like money, equipment, and so on and so forth that were critical in enabling the logic of that model to function. And from this research that we've done, where we acquire logic and qualifiers, and from our own cognitive capacities, we put together a solution. Now, it's very important that we take the logic of that solution and the qualifiers that we've incorporated into that solution to a critic. Somebody that can critically evaluate our solution as we've formulated it. Now, something important to think about is that from the conceptual model to the solution, it's not that we would replicate the conceptual model in the solution, but there might be certain core logic and variables from the conceptual model that will help us to improve upon the logic and conclusions of the variables that we will need to support our solution. But then once we've formulated our solution, we bring that solution to the critic who helps us to evaluate it, and we encourage the expression of tactful, thoughtful reservations associated with the limitations of the model as presented, so that they can help us to identify further qualifiers and further logic that will enable us to put together a more optimal solution. That's the Diamond model.